Howdy gang, today we're finally going to be going over the mods that I did to 75316, the Mandalorian Starfighter. Now, similar to the Slave 1, the main issue that a lot of people had with this set was the cockpit gap, and unfortunately I didn't actually record a review video for this. By the time I had it built, it had been almost a month after the wave came out, so I didn't really see it as necessary. But there used to be a very noticeable cockpit gap. You can obviously see that I've changed it up a little bit. But pretty much we're going to be accomplishing the same thing that we did on the Slave 1, is just removing that gap, and then I improved a few other things here or there. But now getting onto the ship itself past the introduction, people who own this set will immediately notice two things. One, I am missing a minifigure in my lineup here. You can see I have Bo-Katan in the cockpit and I have Gar Saxon sitting here, but my regular Mandalorian fighter, he's nowhere to be seen. And second thing people will notice is there is now a landing gear. That is another thing a lot of people really wanted to have on this set, or that the set should have had from the beginning, and that was landing gear. But while we're on the topic of landing gear, I guess we'll start up there, and I am going to take the wings off for review purposes, so it's a whole lot easier to handle, but I will slap them back on when needed to. So we went ahead and took off the wings, and now we can get a closer look at the ship itself. And you'll see overall, minus the main thing being the filling of the cockpit gap, you'll see that I changed up the plating a little bit here or there, just to mix around some pieces so I could use them in some other spots. I don't remember all exactly the plates that I took, but pretty much this entire section right here got changed up quite a bit. So you can see up at the front I've added some landing gear, and that's so when it's in the landed position with the two wings facing upwards or pointed upwards, it can actually stay level and the head isn't just sagging down hitting the floor. It's very simple. You can see it's pretty much made of 4 pieces, and I think it's straight up ripped from the 2018 X-Wing. I found it in my 2018 X-Wing pieces bag, so it might just be the landing gear exactly from that. But it works really well. It's level with the bricks on the backside, so it's sitting perfectly fine down there. And then moving past that, we kept the guns the same, but I did change how this middle plate is attached because I wanted to mess with the control panel on the inside. So it does sit at a slightly different angle, and it actually can move. It does have a little bit of a customizable angle, but I try and keep it like this to minimize the gap in between the front of the cockpit right there. And then now that we're moving on to the cockpit, this is a mod that, I say this every video, that I'm incredibly proud of. But ironically enough, after I had this built for maybe a week or two, and I finally looked at it, I realized the mod didn't actually accomplish the cockpit gap. It just tricks you into thinking that it fixes that. And I know that probably sounds like it makes no sense, but just let me explain. So with the cockpit piece folded down, I took my minifigure out, hopefully so you can see it a little bit better, but there is actually still a noticeable gap when we're zoomed in this close. But then when we put it down here, it doesn't really look like there's much of a cockpit gap there. The way that works, from what I understand, is because of all this dark blue, it's so dark, it's sucking up a whole lot of that light, and it's really hard to get light efficiently and like well lit in these small little angles that it has to go through with all these jags that Legos have sticking off of them. So we went ahead and tossed a minifigure in there, and it is unfortunate that you can't see their bright blue hands still through it, but overall, it accomplishes that goal of pretty much eliminating that cockpit gap really well. And also on the inside, you can see that slight angle downwards on this tube. It's like 1 or 2 degrees going down. Provides just enough hand and arm room so these minifigures don't have to have their arms way up in the sky. They can have it actually out in front of them as if they were realistically gripping a control panel. And if you guys have watched a lot of my previous videos, you know I do that to a lot of my pilot seats. I put them in a position with some good posture so they could actually grab the controls that are in front of them. And I really like that I was able to accomplish that while accomplishing the cockpit gap problem as well. But you can see up towards the front how I changed how the control panel's sitting on there, just barely so I could get the better angle with this middle brick we talked about sitting there. But a lot of you probably noticed behind Bo-Katan, there's no longer another space for a minifigure. And I know many people will consider that a downgrade, but on the original set, if you had 2 minifigures sitting right next to each other on the inside, it was very cramped, and to me personally, it just looked a little awkward. So I went ahead and modded it. We'll get Bo-Katan out. And then I actually just put a nice little weapon rack back there. You can't see it because all the pieces in the back are black, so all the light's getting sucked out. But it is just those two nice weapons that the Mandalorians came with on this set, just clipped on that backside there. So it's great that I was able to get some weapon storage in the cockpit, but a lot of you guys are probably wondering where you're going to be able to shove your second minifigure. Well, you're probably not wondering. You saw the title of this video, and you could pretty much guess where it's going to be at. It's in this rear little section back here. The first sign of that, for a lot of you guys, I bet, was this clipped hinge right here, how this looks like it can fold up. And you'd be exactly right. Before we get inside, let's just cover the minor differences we made on the outside. So you can see, because I wanted to accomplish a small interior space, I had to change up the way the plating looks on the outside. Not a whole lot. It still is pretty much the exact same shape, and still has the angle downward and covers up the gaps as well as I could. And then I also added an extra barrel on this rear turret, just because it looks silly just having one sticking out. And I had an extra one of these pieces, so I figured why not. But other than that, as far as the exterior goes for the rear turret seat, not much has changed. But when we fold this up, you can see that's where we have our second Mandalorian fighter. Now I will admit it is a little cramped in there, but obviously this set can't really have too much interior space without impeding the rotatability factor and the fun folding wings function. But we can get this roof piece off real easy, and then we can get our fighter out of there, and you can take a look at the small amount of detail I tossed in there. So I went ahead and used an archway piece on the backside, because standard minifigures who don't have the big helmet, when they're leaning back, they'll be able to lean a little bit further back than the Mandalorians do. So if you wanted to use any minifigure that didn't have a helmet and just had a really small head or really small hair piece, you could probably get them to lean back and look a little more natural sitting in this rear compartment. We went ahead and tossed that in there, and then I used the control panel from Rey's Speeder back in 2017, I believe it was, as the controls that he has. Not too much detail going on there, but it's a nice, neat enough little control panel for him to be a gunner. And inserting the minifigure, you do actually have to have him already in the seated position, and then you have to insert it at kind of an angle, and just apply pressure on the head, and he'll get seated right in his spot. Toss our roof piece back on, fold it down, so you can see that with the minifigure, this is the space you're working with. If you do take the minifigure out, you can fold this down just ever so slightly more to help eliminate more of this gap. But other than that, that pretty much covers it for this rear turret seat. We added an extra barrel, and then we added the rear turret seat itself. So that pretty much covers the main fuselage here. And I know a lot of people won't really agree with me on this whole cockpit gap thing, thinking that it actually tricks you into thinking it works. But I'm pretty happy with it, and that's the main objective here. I really like how I was able to use the ball joint to slightly angle this down to get the tiniest more amount of arm room so you can sit your minifigures a little more comfortably so they can actually look like they're piloting the ship and they can see out of the windshield. So we got the wings reattached, but real quickly I wanted to show you guys that with the landing gear deployed that I showcased earlier, it does sit level with the wings in the proper landed position. So as far as wing changes, not much has really happened here, and I'm sorry for how ugly my left hand looks, got a little beat up. But not much has really changed on here. I think I may have taken a few slope pieces to help fill out this central area right here, but overall they pretty much remain the same. I know I added a few cheese slopes right here to help build it up into this main area, but other than that, not much has really changed. It seems to remain pretty standard. And I know a lot of people have modded their wings to where the studs are pointed this way. They pretty much just flipped them around so the studs are facing this way when it's landed, so it looks a little more displayable. But I'm pretty happy with it with the anti-studs showing, and a lot of the times I have the wings folded down anyways. And as well, if you did want to land the ship like this rather than the wings folded up, the landing gear does work in this position as well. You do just have to be a little careful. You do only have 3 points of contact, so it's not really supported on the outer edges of the wings like that. Alrighty guys, well that pretty much covers it. Overall, we had the same goal and we accomplished it that we did with the Slave 1, which was eliminating the cockpit gap. But other than that, that pretty much covers it. The cockpit gap that we just went over, and then the nice added rear turret seat back there. I wasn't originally going to do that, but once I added the weapon rack up front, I knew I needed somewhere else to toss this Mandalorian figure or it was going to get lost in the collection, so I went ahead and tossed him in the rear there. But I hope you guys did enjoy, and I think we only have 1 or 2 sets left from that summer wave for me to mod and upload, so our next one we're probably going to have is that Imperial Light Cruiser, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But other than that, that's all I got for you. I'll see you guys next time. Peace, fellas.